Have you ever wondered why you apologize even when you've done nothing wrong? Why one unanswered text can make your mind race? Or why you keep giving your heart to people who never seem to choose you back? What if the answers didn't begin with your relationships, but with a few ordinary sentences you heard as a child? Not the shouting, not the punishment. Just a handful of words repeated often enough that they quietly became your inner voice. The frightening part is that most of us never question those words. We simply grow up believing they're true. Today we're uncovering 8 toxic phrases that can shape the way you love, trust, communicate, and see yourself as an adult. This isn't about blaming parents. Many were raising children while carrying wounds of their own. But healing begins when we recognize what shaped us and decide it doesn't have to define us. The first phrase is one millions of children hear every day. You're too sensitive. Maybe you came home crying after a bad day at school. Maybe someone embarrassed you, or you simply felt overwhelmed. Instead of comfort, you were told you were overreacting. To a child, that doesn't sound like feedback. It sounds like your feelings can't be trusted. Over time, you stop listening to your emotions and start trusting everyone else's instead. As an adult, that can look like apologizing before sharing your opinion, questioning whether your feelings are valid, or convincing yourself you're always the problem. But emotions aren't weaknesses, they're signals. They tell us when something feels unfair, unsafe, or painful. Ignoring them doesn't make them disappear. It often turns them into anxiety, overthinking, or people-pleasing. The second phrase sounds harmless, but it quietly steals a child's voice. Because I said so. Children ask questions because they're trying to understand the world. But when every question is dismissed, they begin learning that their thoughts don't matter. Years later, that lesson follows them into adulthood. You stay quiet during disagreements. You avoid difficult conversations. You say it's fine, even when it isn't. Not because you don't have an opinion, but because somewhere deep inside, speaking up still feels unsafe. Psychologists often connect this with people-pleasing, a survival strategy where keeping everyone else happy feels safer than expressing your own needs. The third phrase can quietly shape your self-worth for years. Why can't you be more like your sister, or your brother, or your cousin, or the neighbor's child? Constant comparison teaches a child that who they are isn't enough. Instead of discovering their own strengths, they spend their lives trying to become someone else. That pattern doesn't disappear with age. It simply changes form. You compare your career to someone else's, your relationship, your appearance, your success. And no matter how much you achieve, it never feels like enough, because the finish line keeps moving. Real confidence doesn't come from being better than someone else. It comes from becoming more of who you truly are. But the next phrase goes even deeper. It teaches a child that love must be earned. The fourth phrase often sounds like encouragement. You can do better. There's nothing wrong with encouraging a child to improve. Healthy encouragement celebrates effort before pointing toward growth. But when a child only hears what they didn't do well enough, they begin believing that love is tied to achievement. Maybe you brought home a 98, and the first question was, where did the other 2 marks go? Maybe you cleaned the whole house, but all anyone noticed was the one thing you missed. After enough moments like that, a child reaches a painful conclusion. If I want to be loved, I have to be perfect. That belief doesn't disappear with age. It becomes perfectionism. You finish one goal and immediately chase the next. You struggle to accept compliments because they never feel deserved. Even your biggest achievements feel temporary, as if you're only one mistake away from disappointing everyone. The fifth phrase carries a different kind of weight. I sacrificed everything for you. Parents make sacrifices. That's part of raising a child. But when those sacrifices become emotional debts, children begin paying with something they should never have to give: their peace. They stop asking for help. They hide their needs. They become the easy child who never complains. From the outside, they seem mature. Inside, they're carrying responsibilities that were never theirs. Psychologists call this parentification, when children become emotional caretakers instead of being cared for. As adults, these children often feel responsible for everyone else's happiness. A friend is upset, so they rush to fix it. Their partner has a bad day, and they immediately assume it's their fault. They say yes when they're exhausted because saying no feels selfish. But here's the truth. Being kind doesn't mean carrying everyone's emotional weight. Healthy love says, I care about you. Unhealthy guilt says, your happiness is my responsibility. Those are not the same thing. The The sixth phrase is one of the most confusing because it disguises control as love. If you really loved me, you would. Maybe it ended with, do what I asked. Stop making me angry. Stay here. To a child, this sends one clear message. Love is conditional. Love becomes something that can be lost if you disappoint someone. Years later, that lesson quietly follows you into adult relationships. You avoid setting boundaries. You say yes when every part of you wants to say no. You tolerate disrespect because you're afraid that standing up for yourself will push people away. But that's not love. That's fear pretending to be love. Real love doesn't require you to abandon yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. And the final two phrases leave some of the deepest emotional scars of all. The seventh phrase can quietly convince a child that love must always be earned. I only want what's best for you. On its own, this sentence can come from a place of genuine care. But when it's used to dismiss a child's feelings, control their choices, or make them feel guilty for wanting something different, it sends another message. Your needs don't matter as much as mine. Children raised this way often grow into adults who struggle to trust themselves. They constantly ask others for approval before making decisions. They second-guess their instincts and feel guilty whenever they choose their own happiness over someone else's expectations. Over time, they stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What will make everyone else happy?" But healing begins the moment you realize that honoring your own needs isn't selfish. It's part of becoming a healthy adult. And then there's the final phrase, the one that can leave some of the deepest invisible wounds. I wish you were never born. Maybe those exact words were never spoken. Maybe it sounded more like, you ruined my life. Everything got harder because of you. You're nothing but trouble. To an adult, those words may sound like anger. To a child, they sound like truth. Children naturally believe the people who raise them. So instead of thinking my parent is overwhelmed, they think, there must be something wrong with me. That belief doesn't always stay visible. Sometimes it becomes the reason you accept less than you deserve. The reason compliments make you uncomfortable. The reason you stay in relationships where you're barely loved, because part of you believes that's all you're worth. But here's what every child deserves to know. You were never born unworthy of love. You adapted to the environment you grew up in. And what the brain learns through repeated experiences, it can also relearn through new ones. Healing doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens every time you set a healthy boundary. Every time you say no without feeling guilty. Every time you allow yourself to be seen instead of pretending you're okay. Every time you choose people who respect your heart instead of making you fight for their attention. Little by little, you're teaching your nervous system something it may have never learned before. That love doesn't have to be earned. Imagine meeting your younger self today. The child who only wanted to feel safe. The child who wondered if they were enough. Now imagine kneeling beside them and saying, I'm so glad you're here. Your feelings matter. You don't have to be perfect. You never had to earn love. Maybe no one ever said those words to you. But that doesn't make them any less true. The sentences that shaped your childhood may explain your past, but they don't have to decide your future. Every time you choose self-respect over self-sacrifice, every time you replace self-criticism with self-compassion, every time you believe your voice deserves to be heard, you're breaking a cycle that may have existed for generations. And one day, that courage won't just change your life. It may change someone else's childhood too. If this video resonated with you, tell us in the comments, which phrase stayed with you the longest? Your story could remind someone else that they're not alone. And if you're passionate about understanding human behavior, healing childhood wounds, and building healthier relationships, subscribe to Psych Mindset. Because sometimes, the first step toward healing is realizing that the voice inside your head was never meant to become your own.